If you've been watching me, you know that as much as I want to like SeaWorld, it's just really hard to do so because the place is an absolute mess. I grew up going to Busch Gardens Tampa and SeaWorld Orlando when they were both owned and operated by Anheuser-Busch, and during that period, their parks were treated with a lot of love and care. However, after the company was essentially the victim of a hostile takeover in 2008, their parks were sold off and have become the playthings of private equity firms. Since then, the quality of the parks have declined severely in their operations and maintenance, and instead of being great family parks with attractions for everyone, they began to pivot heavily towards roller coasters, as these are easy returns on investment that bring in a lot of locals. I'm certainly not against larger, more thrilling coasters being added to the parks, but for a while, it was cheap coaster after cheap coaster, and in 2023, SeaWorld got a really strange addition with Pipeline the Surf Coaster. Notably, this is an experimental model of a stand-up coaster, where you stand on a surfboard and the seats bounce up and down for a bit of a novelty ride. However, with its otherwise underwhelming layout and uncomfortable ride experience, this just wasn't a win for the park despite its unique nature. The next year, in 2024, SeaWorld introduced Penguin Trek, which replaced the former dark ride, Antarctica Empire of the Penguin. I was actually surprised to find that this coaster was more fun than I anticipated. It even starts with a small indoor section before launching you out into the park. Notably, this is also a coaster meant to accommodate younger children with a lower height requirement and no inversions, which makes this a great addition for families. I heard through the grapevine that SeaWorld was receiving complaints that there wasn't enough for younger kids to do, and so I think that this was the start of that pivot, which makes sense, as Busch Gardens also opened a family coaster last year with Phoenix Rising. However, Penguin Trek in particular is a mess operationally, requiring you to wait in a queue to actually exit the building, as everyone must go through the penguin exhibit. In my video on it last year, I also made the point that not only were you not allowed to exit after leaving the ride, but that SeaWorld actually barricaded emergency fire exits, which I think should tell you a lot about how the company is being run. So now we come to this year, with the opening of Expedition Odyssey. The building it's housed in actually opened in 1992 with a simulator similar to Star Tours, known initially as Mission Bermuda Triangle. It was then rethemed in 1995 as Wild Arctic, which added an extensive Arctic animal exhibit after the ride, in one of the coolest themed areas I've ever seen in a theme park. However, Wild Arctic closed in 2020, and while the animal exhibit stayed open, the ride area was closed off. The simulator was then taken out, and now 5 years later, has been replaced with Expedition Odyssey, a new family flying theater attraction that is about as lazy and poorly executed as I could have anticipated. I was even sent a video where a letter from the new sign fell and hit somebody while waiting in the line, so even before officially opening, it's off to a rough start, with the rest of the sign having now been removed. Yeah, I'm glad that the SeaWorld lineup is achieving some balance with more family-oriented attractions, but predictably, the opening of this ride has been a mess, and the actual ride itself is just a low-budget version of Disney's Soarin'. So, with that said, let's just get right into it. On entering under the new sign, which I assume will be put back up eventually, you wait through a brief, unthemed outdoor queue and make your way inside. Walking through a short hallway, you emerge out into a large square room, which holds its line through a series of switchbacks. The walls are decorated with lit panels that show Arctic landscapes and animals, but otherwise, there's nothing really at all going on in here. Admittedly, it's mildly interesting, but considering the low capacity of the ride and how slowly it loads, you're probably going to spend a lot of time in here, and so it's not doing much to entertain you while you wait. Continuing on, as you enter the pre-show room, you pass by more panels which tease some of the animals you'll see on the ride, and entering the pre-show itself, you stand on a numbered dot and watch the televisions above. The video cycles through shots of animals in the Arctic as the narrator conveys a bit of information about the Arctic ecosystem, and then transitions to talking about researchers who have filmed the video for the ride, which is actually really notable for how meta the attraction is. It's pretty upfront about the ride experience, just sending you through shots captured by their team. The video then gives safety and boarding instructions, and being led into the next room, you then take your seat on the bench. Initially, this may seem like Soarin', but it's actually like the Masters of Flight flying theater in Legoland, where your bench instead just turns to face a domed screen. Usually, in videos where I talk about simulators, I take the time to explain what's happening in the scenes, but in this case, I'm just going to show you the entire video, and we'll come back and discuss exactly what doesn't work about it. At the conclusion of the ride, you exit into a hallway decorated with the northern lights, and notably, the ceiling has some star panels, which I think is actually a fun little flair. Exiting from the hall though, you then make your way into the Arctic Animal exhibit, where you can currently see beluga whales, walruses, and weirdly, African penguins, who definitely do not live in the Arctic. From here, you make your way through the lengthy exhibit to the exit gift shop, which is quite the walk, but at the very least, you don't have to stay in here and queue an extra 15 minutes like you do for Penguin Trek just to leave. Part of why I wanted to show the full video for Expedition Odyssey is because, as of writing this video, there doesn't seem to be a POV online, so I think this is actually where you'll see it first. I also don't think that the actual ride scenes are particularly exciting, because as a calm scenic ride, the footage along with the music is the main appeal, so it's a lot less interesting to hear me describe it rather than just watching the full film. In the case of attractions like Soarin', it too is a scenic ride, but at least every scene is distinctly different, making the overall experience a lot more memorable with standout moments. In contrast with Expedition Odyssey, the entire film takes place in the Arctic, and so comes off as homogeneous, which would make describing every scene quite boring in my opinion. However, where I think the content of the film is fine, on a technical level, that's where it really fails. In the same way that Soarin' opens with a shot of the Matterhorn, this ride opens with an Arctic mountain, and I'm sure you've noticed just how much the domed screen distorts and bends the image. Soarin' does have this particular issue with the Eiffel Tower, which is apparently being fixed soon, and to a smaller extent, the scene with the Taj Mahal and the rock formations in Monument Valley. In Expedition Odyssey, the distortion is all over the place, and outside of that, the film quality is also just poor. YouTube compression does make videos look worse, but the actual video on the dome is often as legitimately blurry as what you're watching, which isn't helped by the speakers literally shaking the screen and the image. In Soarin', this does happen when the music swells and you fly over Iguazu Falls, but that only occurs in this one scene and actually helps it feel a lot more climactic. In Expedition Odyssey, the screen just shakes the already low quality film, and if you look at the actual shots, they're not even good, often coming in too close to the object of focus or otherwise moving away too quickly. You might see some of these shots and think that my camera is failing to capture the entire field of view, but no, that's actually just how the film looks, failing to capture what it intended. Overall, Expedition Odyssey is just kind of a mediocre and acceptable addition to SeaWorld's lineup, but you can really see how they cheaped out, which is evident through the film's technical failings. The queue is as barebone as it gets, and the operations are predictably slow. Granted, I went during pass holder preview, so I can understand that operations are still getting a handle on the ride, but this is also SeaWorld we're talking about, so I doubt that it's going to get much faster. If you're in the park on a slow day without a wait, Expedition Odyssey is probably an acceptable filler attraction that will appeal to younger kids, but otherwise, there's nothing remarkable going on here. When Icebreaker premiered in 2022, SeaWorld described the coaster as the first step in revitalizing this section of the park, and to their credit, they also added light theming to the area and renamed Mango Joe's as Altitude Burgers. With the opening of Expedition Odyssey, at least it does pull the area together a bit better, with both the ride and a new entrance to the Arctic exhibit, but otherwise, this is just another cheap addition to SeaWorld, which is disappointing, because I know that they could be great if they weren't being run into the ground by private equity. I don't really have much else to say about this ride, because it is what it is, but hopefully you at least found this video to be somewhat interesting. If you did, you can help me out by leaving a like, and if you haven't yet subscribed and hit the bell notification yet either, you can also do so now to be alerted to new videos as they're released.